Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. Today we're exploring a breathtaking story of absolute royal glory, shocking family betrayal, and just incredible architectural resilience. Imagine for a second walking into a sprawling, quiet courtyard. The brilliant South Indian sun strikes these towering pale arches, lighting up intricately painted ceilings that stretch way high above you. The stone pathways are literally echoing with centuries of history. We're looking at a magnificent structure that has watched empires rise, completely shatter, and then reinvent themselves. It's a journey through time that is honestly just as much about the sheer, stubborn will of a building to survive as it is about the monarchs who built and broke it.
You know, when you think of Madurai, your mind almost instantly goes to the ancient, towering Meenakshi Temple. I mean, for good reason, right? It is the spiritual epicenter of the city and absolutely one of South India's most famous, visually stunning shrines. But just 2 kilometers southeast of that world-renowned site sits an entirely different kind of heartbeat. It's the secular, royal pulse of the city, the Thirumalai Nayakkar Mahal, or simply the Madurai Palace. It's this 385-year-old architectural marvel, a marker of the city's profound regal history that, crazy enough, often gets completely overshadowed by its sacred neighbor.
Okay, let's dive right into this because this is the staggering mystery at the heart of our explainer today. We're talking about a royal structure that was once so vast, so incredibly grand, that it covered a sprawling 20 acres of land, a literal city within a city. Yet what remains today is just a fraction of its former self. So how does a royal masterpiece lose 3/4 of its physical mass? I mean, try to imagine the sheer physical weight of that loss, but somehow retain absolutely all of its majesty. Well, to figure that out, we have to wind the clock back and examine the intense political landscape that birthed it. To truly grasp the origins of this palace, we really need to track how regional power shifted on a massive scale. Back in the 14th century, the colossal Vijayanaga Empire, ruling all the way from its capital in Hampi, captured Madurai. But you know how it is with sprawling empires? They are notoriously difficult to manage. So by the 16th century, regional governors, known as Nayaks, started rising in prominence. Then came the major turning point. The great Vijayanagar emperor Krishnadevaraya died in 1529 CE. This wasn't just a power vacuum, it was the total shattering of a massive imperial grip. It allowed these highly ambitious regional governors to finally step out of the shadows. By the time Tirumala Nayak took the throne in 1623 CE, the stage was beautifully set for a totally new era of regional dominance.
Now, the brilliant engine behind this rise to power was something called the Nayakkar system. Think of it almost like a massive, high-stakes early franchise model, or a highly independent state system. The emperor distributed territories to these Nayaks. The deal was incredibly simple, but super effective. The Nayaks paid a fixed annual sum to the emperor, and in exchange, they got to lord over their territories with vast, almost unchecked independence. This decentralized governance strategy fundamentally altered the power dynamics in places like Tanjore, Jinji, and of course Madurai, giving these governors the exact leverage they needed to eventually become powerful, autonomous rulers.
So, this newfound independence sparked a massive, high-stakes game of geographical chess. In 1623, our key figure, Tirumala Nayak, strategically switches his capital from Trichy back to Madurai. The goal here was to carefully organize his kingdom's defenses against incoming military campaigns. And to mark this monumental shift and firmly cement his newly solidified might, he orders the construction of an enormous palace. But notice the twist that happens decades later. The capital shifts back to Trichy in 1665. This constant back-and-forth movement of the royal seat creates this simmering tension, a tension that ultimately dictates the palace's incredibly dramatic fate.
Now, what's really interesting about this is how the palace was actually built. When Tirumala Nayak set out to build his masterpiece between 1629 and 1636 CE, he flatly refused to just stick to local traditions. He demanded a structure that reflected a broader, much more worldly ambition, so he brought together sweeping Islamic arches, deeply intricate Dravidian carvings, and majestic Rajput domes. And to orchestrate this seemingly impossible architectural symphony, get this, he reportedly appointed an Italian architect to design it. The architect brilliantly blended these distinct styles, forging a completely unique cultural identity in stone. The result was a stunning 20-acre monument that looked like absolutely nothing else in the region. By utilizing this distinct Italian-influenced blend of styles, King Tirumala Nayak was actually engaging in a brilliant form of psychological warfare. He wasn't just building a residence, he was projecting immense wealth and absolute royal power. See, this cosmopolitan design stood in stark contrast to the highly traditional South Indian royal architecture of the era, which was heavily reliant on timber and familiar local motifs. It was a massive, intimidating statement. It silently but loudly told allies and fiercely independent enemies like the Sultans of Bijapur that Madurai was wealthy, globally connected, culturally sophisticated, and practically untouchable.
248. I want you to truly visualize that number for a second. 248. This represents the staggering amount of majestic, intricately carved pillars that support the palace complex. Imagine walking through a literal forest of stone and mortar. And these pillars aren't just holding up the roof. Many stand an imposing 82 feet high and 19 feet wide, rising to meet elaborate, sweeping arches covered in detailed stucco work. They completely overwhelm the senses, each one contributing to an aura of scale and grandeur that makes any visitor feel appropriately small in the presence of the king.
To really understand that scale, let's walk through it in our minds. The original floor plan was divided into two massive, distinct sections. To your left, the Ranga Vilasa. Here, you would hear the clash of steel from the armory and the resounding music of the royal bandstand. This was the functional, administrative, and ceremonial muscle of the palace. But to your right is the Swargavilasa, the celestial pavilion. This was the absolute core of the king's power. It housed the Nayak's massive throne itself, alongside the primary, hyper-luxurious royal residences.
So what was a typical day like inside that Swargavilasa? It was a fascinating study in contrasts. On one hand, you had the heavy, serious atmosphere of the massive throne room, where intense court politics were navigated and justice was dispensed. But just steps away, the environment completely transformed into an enclosed, vibrant paradise. You had deeply sacred shrines for daily worship, royal apartments draped in luxury, a magnificent dancing hall, and the Natak Sala Theater. All of this was surrounded by the serene sounds of babbling fountains and lush, sprawling gardens.
And this brilliantly illustrates, well, the sheer tragedy of the whole thing, honestly. A massive 75% of this glorious complex, virtually an entire royal city, was dismantled or completely destroyed over the centuries. Everything we just envisioned, the sprawling acres of manicured gardens, the dedicated theaters, the massive armories, gone. Mostly gone. Only a 25% fraction remains. That smaller piece of the pie represents the entirety of the surviving palace structure that awestruck tourists walk through today.
Try to picture a vibrant 20-acre complex, originally 4 times the size of what proudly stands today. The vast majority of that history has just vanished into the earth. Yet, looking at what remains, we're actually incredibly lucky in one very specific, crucial regard. That 25% that actually survived the centuries, it contains the Swargavilasa itself. The specific area where Tirumala Nayak lived, slept, and held court from his throne was spared. The limbs of the palace may have been severed, but the very heart of the complex beat on. But how exactly did it lose that staggering 75%? You might logically assume it was razed by a conquering army or some ruthless foreign invader, right? Nope. The truth is a shocking, bitter twist of betrayal. In 1665 CE, it was Chuckanatha Nayak, Tirumala's very own grandson, who moved the capital back to Trichy. And to build his grand new abode there, he didn't bother quarrying new stone. Instead, he actively dismantled large parts of his grandfather's majestic Madurai palace. It's the ultimate historical irony. This magnificent structure survived the collapse of empires, only to be heavily cannibalized by the builder's own flesh and blood. And the painful decline certainly didn't stop with the grandson. After the Nayak rule effectively ended around 1736 CE, Madurai entered a highly checkered period. The Nawab of Carnatic held nominal rule for about 60 years, and by 1801, British administration took hold. During this colonial era, the palace endured wildly utilitarian uses that stripped away every ounce of its royal dignity. The magnificent celestial pavilion, repurposed as army barracks, then converted into an industrial paper factory. It served as a dusty hub for local weavers. And to compound all these indignities, in 1857, what was left of the weakened structure suffered extensive, devastating damage from heavy rains. Just when it seemed the once glorious palace would crumble entirely into dust and memory, salvation arrived in 1870. Governor Francis Napier of the Madras Presidency took a profound personal interest in the crumbling ruins. He allotted an absolutely massive sum of 5.13 lakh rupees specifically to spearhead the restoration.
Now, to grasp the sheer scale of this intervention, 5.13 lakh rupees in 1870 equates to the modern equivalent of millions of dollars today. It was an unprecedented, monumental investment that literally pulled the structure back from the brink of total annihilation.
So the crucial point is, this isn't just a timeline of events. It's a triumphant story of a building that stubbornly refused to die. From Napier's vital, multi-million-dollar intervention in 1870, the palace found new life. Post-independence, it proved its enduring structural strength by serving functionally as the Madurai Ramnad District Court all the way until 1970. Yep, a courthouse. It was only after 1970 that its true historical and architectural value was officially shielded, when it was rightfully declared a protected monument by the State Archaeology Department.
Today, the Thirumalai Nayakkar Mahal stands proud, a monumental testament to the legacy of a master builder, the brilliant fusion of global architecture, and the sheer resilience of a grand vision. Which leaves us with this final thought. If a palace can lose 75% of its walls, suffer through family betrayal, endure being a literal paper factory, and weather severe storms, yet still hold on to its absolute majesty, what other fragments of incredible, grand history are hiding in plain sight in your own city, just waiting for you to look a little closer? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope you enjoyed it.